Our first guest on today's bonus episode is Roanoke City Council member and Vice Mayor Joe Cobb, who was included in Isla's feature on the fight against homelessness in Roanoke. Hi, Joe. Thanks so much for coming on our show today.
How are you?
Great. Thank you for being here. Joe is a city council member who has always made it very clear that citizens can speak openly about their concerns or issues. And your open door policy means you probably hear from a lot of people in the community. I'm sure you get plenty of questions, concerns, and hopefully even some positive suggestions, yes?
I do.
Good.
I do. The whole range.
Good. So if you don't mind giving just a real quick overview of your background and your city council membership now that you're such an important leader in our region.
Sure. So I moved to Roanoke in 2001. I was a stranger. I didn't know anybody here. I kind of jumped right in to start meeting people. One of the first people I met was Pearl Fu, who's a legend around here.
Of course, local colors and
she
much
got
more.
me involved in local colors. I started out working in the arts community with Roanoke Symphony. Went back into pastoral ministry, and then for 8 years was pastor of the Metropolitan Community Church of the Blue Ridge in Roanoke. And that really brought me more to the forefront in terms of social justice and equity and equality, not only for the LGBTQ plus community, but for people who are marginalized in general.
Mm-hmm.
So being a voice for them or empowering their own voice to be a part of decision making. And when I left that work in 2017, I wondered what I could do to expand that footprint of social justice and equity work. And a friend of mine, actually Juna Osborne, a former councilwoman, encouraged me to run, and I decided to and was elected. She and I were both elected in 2018, and then I just got reelected this last fall.
Feels like you just got in there like last week. I mean, time really flew by. Well, that's great. What are some of the things that you've really focused on in the last few years since then?
Well, I think access is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Just so people know they can access and know that their council members are available to talk with them and meet with them.
Mm-hmm.
Through COVID, I learned how resilient our city is. I mean, I knew our city was amazing before, but our ability to respond as quickly as we did, to recover, to really be adaptable and agile during that time, and then to see that resilience kind of keep showing up, even through some of our greatest challenges, which we've seen get even more challenging since COVID.
Right.
So that's something I'm proud of. I really am proud of our city's work in addressing and reducing gun violence. That continues to be a challenge. We've seen that increase. But to see the collaborative work that's taking place between city government, community partners, the police department, and a lot of our city agencies has been really powerful. And because so much of our work has been focused on prevention and intervention, those results take longer to see because they're so relationship focused. Sure. I also think just raising awareness about the economic strength of our city has been a thing of mine. I'm so proud of the support we give to our schools. We don't see the battles that we see in other communities where the schools, always having to beg for or fight for money. We just upfront say, this is one of our top commitments. And the other thing I would add is that our focus on addressing and raising compensation for our city employees and starting with community safety employees has been a real significant priority, and we've made significant progress.
And obviously keeps our city going. I mean,
it does.
Obviously,
all those essential services. The new transit facility for Valley Metro is very exciting.
Yes.
So there are a lot of things to be proud of.
Yeah, a lot of investment into the city that's going to turn out, obviously, in our favor.
Right.
So in our feature, specifically about homelessness today, which is our conversation, we're talking about, in the note, you had noted that the number has actually been reduced by 60% over the last decade, thanks in part to organizations like Blue Ridge Continuum of Care and Blue Ridge Interagency Council on Homelessness. I was wondering if you had any more updated numbers in terms of the spike in homelessness, how we can realistically address any of those numbers, what they mean.
Well, I don't know. I don't think the January point in time data has been released yet. So
at this point in time, yes, you're correct. I looked yesterday to be sure, and it was still.
I know it's close to being released, but I will say that my understanding is that it continues to reflect some of the increase we've seen in the number of unsheltered people, and There is a range to that. So you have some people who identify as unsheltered because of chronic social anxiety. They just can't, because of severe mental health. They can't be in close quarters with other people. You have some that are still scared of COVID, and that continues to be a difficult issue. The COVID funding that was available to house people in hotels, that money it's no more.
Right.
And in fact, the hotels that we were working with are no more. So that's created a few challenges.
And the numbers don't include people who are, for example, living on friends' couches and things like that.
No.
Right.
Now, they might identify as homeless,
Right.
but not necessarily unsheltered. So when you look at school data, like that's one of the numbers that is reflected in that data, where the phrase doubling up, it means they're staying with somebody.
Right. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, because I
Yeah.
do have some numbers from RCPS, which were really critical to a later part of the conversation.
The thing that was, I guess, not surprising but concerning that everyone took notice of is that we saw a pretty dramatic increase in unsheltered youth and young adults. And that for those willing to self-identify, part of that increase was LGBTQ youth.
Right. And so Isla had mentioned, so in talking to her about things that don't fit in print, right? We can only fit so much information in 4 pages. And unfortunately, there's just so much data and information to go off of. But she specifically noted your incredible passion for helping the youth, particularly in LGBTQ plus community. So really quick, at the time of this episode's recording, Roanoke City Public Schools is reporting for the 2022-2023 school year, 573 students have experienced homelessness in their district. We know homelessness can take on many different forms, with students living in shelters while others stay in hotels or live with family and friends. That obviously gravely impacts a student, that routine that they desperately need to keep things moving, the stability and place to call home. RCPS actually is able to provide support for students and families who are experiencing housing instability through the federal McKinney-Vento program. And the school district is committed to providing support to students experiencing homelessness, providing programs to assist and help maintain successful academic experiences. And so for those who are interested, your child can enroll in school even if you have uncertain temporary housing or no permanent physical address. But in terms of these youth that you're speaking of, I mean, what resource, why is this important? I mean, I know that's like a really broad question, but you're passionate about it, and I want to hear it from you.
Yeah, well, I think one of the realities is, even though we've made so many strides in terms of acceptance of LGBTQ people, there are still situations, and unfortunately increasing situations, where youth are kicked out of their homes. They have no support at home. And so if they don't have that extended familial support or friend support, they're kind of on their own. There was a situation about a month ago where I learned about a transgender student kind of in that gap between high school and not quite 21. I actually think they were just under 18, but once we were able to determine, and this person self-identified as transgender, then we began looking at, well, what are our options? Because if this is a person considered a juvenile, there are limitations on where they can actually be sheltered. We don't have a dedicated, safe shelter space exclusively for LGBTQ people. Most of our, if not all of our shelter programs have received extensive training and are making provisions for youth and persons who identify as LGBTQ. But even with that, the situation may not be conducive to that person's well-being. So there tend to be even more questions that arise when someone is LGBTQ and homeless, and so they don't have that family support. They may not have a lot of friend support. So we have to turn to those organizations in our city that are dedicated to that work, and whether it's mental health counselors that focus on transgender issues, Youth Saga, which is a great youth and young adult support group, the Roanoke Diversity Center, And then a growing number of people who are very interested in creating a safe house or safe shelter space for LGBTQ people in the community.
Do you think there might eventually come a time where there's a space just for them?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's going to come sooner rather than later.
Really?
Because more and more people are aware of this, and Roanoke wants to be a place that makes sure no one's falling through the gaps.
Right. Well, in talking about, that's a great point. And so back in 2021, we're going to talk a little slightly controversial in terms of what we're discussing, but Roanoke City Council in 21 passed a sidewalk ordinance that prohibited sleeping on sidewalks in the downtown district. And I remember that being pretty controversial. 6 months after implementation, City Manager Bob Cowell told WSLS that it was successful. Downtown encampments have left and they have not fined and arrested anybody. Again, this was about 6 months ago. However, that did lead to some public concern that just shifts into other neighborhoods and, under bridges and things like that, new camps. Are there any updates on that or how that's evolved since then?
Well, I think that's still part of the challenge.
Sure.
We still find that we're addressing how to get resources to people who are in encampments outside of the downtown area. I know that when Brian Mann with Park Roanoke came to talk with us recently about some of the things they've been doing in the parking garages, that one of the things they discovered were the number of people that were sleeping in the garages because they wanted a safe place that they could sleep. So our homeless assistance team works every day, as do our community partners, to try and connect people with resources that include housing, that include shelter, that include supportive services. And what we've discovered with some of the encampment situations is that some people are willing to receive those services. Some are just outright resistant. They don't want to have any part of it. And so,
is it a trust issue in that aspect? I mean, I know there's a number of factors.
I think some of it's trust, some of it, if you've got someone who has severe mental illness and has not been on medication in some time, you have to navigate that. Some people are just defiant. They just, they don't want anything. They just want to be where they are. But then that creates it creates a public health issue. Because often what I have seen with the encampments is that they become very spread out. It's hard to control, trash, belongings, and it can bring in. It can be detrimental not only to the people who are staying there. It can be detrimental to their health. But then the community around them. So we have to keep in mind the public health piece of that. And the goal is always to get somebody housed or sheltered and to get them connected with the services they need. So, but it's true that once that left downtown, it started showing up in other parts of the city. And as we become aware of those, the homeless assistance team goes and tries to work with them. And then in a worst case scenario, we would have to go in and remove them and clean up the area.
Right. And Matt Cruikshank, who helps lead the HAT, so he is our Roanoke City's Human Services Administrator. And so his efforts over the last 11 years extend to bureaucratic work and direct service programs like Homeless Assistance Team HAT, which we'll call for short. That started in the 90s, actually. The team is an outreach program, in case you did not know this, that connects individuals who are on the streets to those services that are being provided. And so that includes everything from emergency services, financial help, and more. It was originally comprised of 3 case members, and 2 new members were added recently when the city observed the growing need. They also offer interpreters for non-English speakers, which is really important. It's worth noting HAT has a great information and helpful videos on their website for those seeking those resources and for those who want to help and maybe aren't sure where to start. But in addition to the homeless assistance team, I'd love to know more about the programs and services you're talking about, how the city's providing for that.
So we work collaboratively with a lot of agencies, whether it is accessing mental health, whether it's accessing an ID. One of the organizations, the least of these ministries, is an afternoon and evening outreach program. So people can actually go to them and take showers as they can at the Rescue Mission. They can have outdoor storage lockers. All of these organizations have supplies that might be needed. We work very closely with the Fralin Free Clinic, which is part of the mission, to do outreach, because a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness have medical conditions that they may not get treated because they think it's going to cost them something.
Right. And you'll hear from, so Melissa from Ram House in our next segment, we'll talk a little bit about that. But Lee Clark also from the Rescue Mission he'll touch on that a little bit too, because I was curious. It's not just going in for, when you feel bad. It's they offer on a range of services that's really great for those who might not otherwise get those.
And for people in recovery or on the path of recovery. So we've seen the opioid epidemic just really spiral. And so we have the Drop-In Center and Virginia Harm Reduction Coalition, both of whom have mobile units that go out and provide harm reduction services for people who need them, and they stay connected with them. So this is very relationship-based work, to see someone move from where they might be met to where they might be housed, and the services that continue. Another piece that's really important is what we call permanent supportive housing. And when Arch Services closed, they were the primary managers of the permanent supportive housing. And then the Council of Community Services Community Housing Resource Center, headed by Brian Burnett, took that over for 4 months. And he's supervising that work now, and that's going to be handed off to another agency probably June 1st, that will coordinate and manage that. But that process is taking someone who has been previously unsheltered and needs that kind of 24/7 supportive service to get them into housing, and then to make sure that they have access through case management to those services they need. And so it's really kind of diagnosing what their needs are and what services they need to connect with, and then matching them with those services.
And I was actually going to, you sort of have a bird's eye view of this, right? You're not necessarily in Rescue Mission every single day, but from a bird's eye view, do you feel, or do you know of any gaps that maybe ideally would be filled by something that exists, or maybe something that a program that should come to fruition if somebody has a skill set and they want to know how to help fill a gap?
Well, yeah, I think, of course, all of the agencies have need for volunteers. Right. I think mental health support is a gap. It's not that we have excellent mental health providers in the area. It's just we don't have enough of them. So increasing the number of and availability of those is ideal. I think we mentioned earlier finding dedicated shelter space for LGBTQ people and those unique needs that they might have, continuing to support the substance abuse work that's being done, the medical support that's being done. And then I think for people who maybe have not been housed for a long time and are just experiencing that again for the first time, just making sure that they have that housing stability support. A lot of our shelter programs that also house people make sure there's like a housing stability coordinator or some people on staff that are dedicated to following up with them.
Lee even talks about like providing furniture and things like that. I mean, because that's expensive.
Kitchen items. I mean, you name it. It's like setting up house. Right. And
that's not easy for anybody, especially someone who really doesn't have much at the time.
Yeah. So whether it's, working through the Roanoke City Public Schools to help youth, or working through any of these agencies that are doing this on a day in, day out basis, everybody has needs. And there's really, as a volunteer, you can kind of pick what you feel most comfortable doing and just dive right in and do it.
Right. And there's multiple opportunities. I mean, whether you're volunteering in the kitchen or sorting through clothes that are donated, I mean, there's any number of things that you can help with if monetarily, isn't really in the field right now.
I met a physician recently who works for the Fralin Free Clinic and has done that in her retirement. So depending on what your profession is, I'm sure there are probably mental health professionals who are continuing to do some of that work, even beyond maybe they don't have a full caseload, and so they dedicate some of their additional work.
Right. What a wonderful thing for a retired, person who says, I really want to give back. How do I do that? Let's use all the education and knowledge I have to give back. That's really cool. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I know as a city council member, I know you really try to keep that open door policy and making sure that citizens know they can come to you if there's anything that they need.
Yeah. I think on this issue, I just encourage people to, sometimes when we see something that's concerning to us, we don't always just take a step back from it to see what the bigger picture is, or to reflect on the work that's already taking place.
That's really key. I think it's hard to start from scratch when there are organizations that are really would love the help that you're ready to give.
Yeah, and I think during COVID, because homelessness was more in our face, because it was more visible, I think it is very difficult for us as human beings to look at someone else who may reflect a vulnerability, someone else who is struggling, and then we recognize in ourselves, that could be me. But I think the more we reflect on that could be me, the more we connect with the humanity of each other and find a way to help someone access the help that they need.
Absolutely. It's sort of, I heard a lot about after the pandemic, we seek out companionship, we seek out relationships. We have been sort of thirsty for relationship building over the last few years. And I think that this is especially true in this instance when you don't see it every day or you don't connect with that person. So later on, you'll hear from Lee Clark talking about their podcast. And so they interview the guest there. And I think that's a great way to engage and have listeners really kind of, the picture sharpens up a little bit when you hear directly from someone experiencing whatever they're going through right now.
And it's very interesting. I was recently listening to a podcast called On Being, which Krista Tippett is the host, but she was interviewing the Surgeon General. And he has just released a program, an initiative to address the chronic loneliness and sense of separation that exists in our country. And I think it is so wise and so insightful, because it's what we're seeing. When people don't have a natural sense of how to connect with each other and feel isolated, and then when we further stigmatize someone's condition to define them, we enhance isn't the right word. We add to that sense of separation and loneliness. And so the challenge becomes, how do we rebuild community? How do we take that compassion that I believe each of us has and use that to connect with each other in a way that restores that intrinsic value of love and humanity.
And you've kind of hit it on the head. And again, Melissa and Lee both will also kind of share that Roanoke Valley, Virginia's Blue Ridge, we're giving, we're a community, we're solid, we're ready to help out our neighbor in our backyard. And I think that's really important because it shows kind of who we are as a community, not just as a city. Right. So anything else you wanted to add before we sign off?
No, it's great to be here. Thank you for bringing this really critical issue to the forefront and to your readers. And for anyone who wants to get involved, just reach out. We'll find a way to connect you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Joe, for being our guest on From Print to Podcast. We really appreciate your time today. We're very grateful for the information he has shared with us. If you have a citizen concern related to our homelessness episode, or in general, you can reach him on the Roanoke government website or email him at joseph.cobb, that's COBB, @roanokeva.gov.